Hey special friends, it's Coach Mary here. On a recent Toolbox Tuesday, several of you filled out a short survey I asked you to do. And first and foremost, I want to say thanks so much for providing your input. There will be future content being scheduled through the rest of 2020 on the topics that were selected. So stay tuned to your inbox to see what that looks like, okay? Another question on that survey that I thought maybe you'd have interest in is things that I do in the kitchen. Some of the things that I already do in the kitchen, some of you probably already do, but I'm going to guess that some of you do not. So today I'm going to go ahead and give you a couple of ideas to honor your food just a little bit further. So what do I mean by honor our food? You know, I like whole food. I want my celery to still be fully on the stalk. I want my shrimp to come in raw and in shells. If I can get them with heads on, great. If not, that's okay, just shell on. I like to buy whole chickens so that I can use every aspect of that. So I am one of those kitchen craft folk that I save what others may consider toss it out in the garbage time. I actually save that, and you'll find a variety of bags in my freezer regularly. So sometimes I'll say to somebody, I'll take any bones you got, and somebody might gift me a ham bone. That's always nice, but I love it when I get a chicken carcass or I get some beef bones, or I just get vegetable scraps so they're not going into the garbage. So today I've started to do 3 broths that I will go ahead and cook this afternoon, 2 of them, and then my chicken bone broth I actually will leave in the crock pot until tomorrow morning. So it is going to go ahead and steep for up to 18 hours. So when that chicken broth comes out tomorrow and it cools down, I'll be able to skim the fat off of it. And then I'll almost be able to slice it to store it in mason jars, and then I put that in my freezer. And sometimes I will, depending on my mason jar availability or my container availability, I might freeze it in ice cube trays so that I can just take one ice cube out and season some kind of sauce that I might be making. Or in the winter, it's really great to have an ice cube tray of your own bone broth around on those really cold days to just add some salt and pepper and sip on some healthy broth. So before I go any further, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the chicken broth. So here I have in my crock pot, let me just show you. There you go. You can see that it's got all the bones. Yep, there's skin still on it. There's a little meat on it. And I haven't completely covered it with water yet. I prefer not to do that because they're going into my crock pot frozen. They're not lying flat. So I will go ahead and go about 2/3 of the water up the bone line so that then when the bones start to defrost and cook down, they effectively are melting all the way down into the base of that crock pot. The only seasoning that I'm putting in my broth at the time that I make my broth, typically, unless I know I'm going to turn it into something right away, but today I'm not. I'm using this for inventory, for stock. I've put a little miso paste in that. If you don't have miso paste, and I'm talking about like a 1/2 teaspoon is all, amino acids are another great thing to add, or even a little bit of cider vinegar. It just upticks, it's a flavor enhancer, and it will not bring an undue flavor to anything that you're going to use those broths with. So that, like I said, I'm going to turn my crock pot on low heat, and those bones are basically going to steep for up to 18 hours, and it will be just rich and delicious. The slower, in my opinion, that you can do your bone broth, the better, because then we're not rapidly taking all of the minerals and vitamins out of those bones, but we're really melting it down into a rich, rich broth that will bring you a lot of taste, flavor, and enjoyment in all your dishes later on. It will get stored in, like I said, either 1/2 pint or pint mason jars most of the time. If you are doing what I'm planning on doing, remember to keep a good inch of space in the top when you're freezing with glass jars, because you want to give that substance some space to expand. Otherwise, you're going to have a cracked jar and have to throw it away. It still may happen at times, but most of the time not, if you keep a good inch in the top of that jar. Another tip is to never take anything that is not already chilled to put into your freezer. Twofold, you create that additional steam inside that, so especially if you're freezing in glass, you take the possibility of cracking a jar, but you're also making your freezer work harder than it needs to. And especially if we're doing this in the summer with some of our seasonal things, we want to be respectful of the piece of equipment, that it's not working harder than it needs to. So that's how I do bone broth. With chicken, I would do the exact same thing with beef bones. So I prefer, and if I have them, we don't eat a whole big bunch of pork. We'll get pork chops every now and again, but I will even save those pork chop bones and put them in with my beef bones, just to add, again, another hint of some more minerals and vitamins. Super, super healthy for your immune system and a healthy lifestyle, okay? But then it gets really fun in making your own milks or your own broths. And I kind of like to think of them, some of them more like milk. And I will use the one that is really luscious is sweet corn milk. So if you're one that you put corn up for in the winter, or even if you don't, but you love sweet corn during the season, I encourage you not to throw away those cobs. Either cut the corn off the cob, or you're going to boil the heck out of it. So I really don't even have an issue if it's my husband and I to take the cobs that we've eaten off of and then freeze them and end up boiling them. But when you take your corn cob, just barely cover it with water and really get it up to a nice even boil on a medium temperature, and then knock that down to low, and so that those cobs can steep. And I like to do that for at least an hour, but really you can go for 2 or 3 as long as you're not boiling the water away. To remove the corn cobs, you'll see a milky substance that is in your pot. It's awesome for potato soups, for any of your chowders that you're going to make, or even another vegetable base when you're making even your beef soups and chicken soups. So again, honoring the whole food. The tips of our vegetables or the cobs of our corn, just the same as the bones in our meat. There's so much more flavor and nutrition in those items. I really encourage you to play around with that. It is incredibly fun to have those things on hand instead of buying a can of, well, let's say clam juice, okay? That takes me to my next pot. I'm going to go ahead and stand up here for just a moment, and I'm going to talk to you about shrimp shells. I know, shrimp shells. That's kind of hard to say, you know that? I went on a trip with my sister to Mexico a few years back, and I had never thought about this before, but the chef of this outdoor alfresco delightful seafood restaurant is where I learned you should always boil your shrimp shells. And so again, as I said earlier, I prefer to buy only shrimp with the peel on and raw. If you can get it with the head on and raw too, that's great. Remember, you're going to have to devein them though, so that you get rid of all of that garbage on the shrimp. You want them to be very clean. So in this particular pot, I have been saving, I don't know, might have been 1.5, maybe 2 bags of peel-on shrimp. I usually buy 21, 25 count. You can get them at the grocery store, at Dixon's, or the Asian market. And every time that I would go to peel them, like for stir fry, something of that nature, I would put the raw shells in a Ziploc bag in the freezer. And so then this is what happens. Oh, it's going to steam up. You might not get in there very well. So just as when you make shrimp and you boil it and the shells turn pink, that's exactly what I've done here. So I turned this on a little bit ago. I went to the basement, came back up. I thought I was boiling shrimp, but I'm really just boiling those shells. So now that broth is going to again get frozen, and I know that I might make a seafood chowder, I might make a clam chowder, and to get that extra flavor from whatever I'm adding to it, I now will have most likely at least 1 good cup of shrimp broth. And again, I just added a touch of miso paste. If you're not familiar with miso paste, it's a soybean paste. It is a great flavor enhancer. You don't need very much of it, and you can buy it in the grocery store. The other broth that I have going this afternoon is a vegetable broth. And we'll see if I can do this without steaming up the window on my camera this time, guys. Since this is all new, I love it that you're willing to just kind of ride with me on this. So in here, you're gonna see, yeah. In that pot, there's a couple of heels of celery, the tips of celery. I save all the leafy internal greens of a stalk of celery. I save the tips and heels of all the carrots that I cut off, okay? And I don't personally peel my carrots, so the only part that I have is the tip and the heel. I like to just clean them really good and eat the carrot. I don't need to take the skin off. There's some potato peelings in there, probably from a sweet potato. That look like there is some beet greens that are in there. There's some kale that's gone in there. This is a super technique to save your greens when you know you're not going to eat them all before they get really slimy. But maybe, especially in the summertime, we have easy access to a lot of greens. And if you're in a CSA, sometimes we get an abundance of that, or your own garden, and you need to use them. Just rinse them in your spinner and toss them in your freezer, and then either chop them up and put them in a stir fry, or go ahead and boil it and make a vegetable broth. Again, just like with the chicken, the shrimp, and the vegetable broth, I'm not having a really deep well of water. I am just barely covering all of those things. Like I said, in the chicken, I'm actually below the top of that. So that's all I have for you today. Thanks for following along. Thanks for giving me a little bit of push to get on the camera and give you some tips from my kitchen. We'll do it again, and any ideas that you have for programming or content on a Toolbox Tuesday or blog, feel free to shoot me a message. I enjoy being here and being a source of inspiration and encouragement for you to live your best life ever by discovering the path between your fork and your feet. Have a real rock solid day, and we'll see one another again. Thanks a lot.